And we are live for the episode 7 of the Phillips Sports Podcast, formerly known as the Fifth Down. This is the second week under this banner in case anybody missed last week's episode. We're going to be recapping the two title games, AFC NFC title. We're going to save the Super Bowl talk for next week because a lot of injury reports. We're not gonna have a whole lot of stuff to go off of. So next week will be the big Super Bowl prediction discussion week. Gonna talk some of the NFL betting on that more than just the game. The Super Bowl MVP odd bets where you can get probably the best bang for your buck with your realistic chance to hit. So that'll be on next week's episode. Just want to get that out of the way. What we are going to talk about today, like I said, AFC, NFC title games. We're going to kind of talk about where the losers of those games kind of feel like they're going to go from here. I feel like they're very impactful kind of fork in the road moments for both losing teams. And we're going to discuss a little bit some of the head coaching decisions on the hiring parts and who's staying with who. Some people I've called for that I thought were going to lose and get jobs haven't. We're going to kind of discuss some of that going forward. But what we're going to start with is the AFC title game. The more surprising of the two outcomes. I believe in the predictions. I had that game at 27-24 or 20-17 or somewhere in there. And I wound up being correct on the spread, just wrong on the points. The Chiefs beat the Ravens 17-10. Lamar Jackson has a horrible game. Really, the Chiefs really hit 17, and then they were just kind of, it felt like to me watching that game, I watched every bit of it and listened to it. Watching and listening to that game, the Chiefs' game plan looks like they got up 7-17 points. They weren't going to risk anything until Baltimore really threatened. And honestly, Baltimore never really did until the Chiefs' very last possession where they iced the game. But the Chiefs outlast them. In my opinion, they really took advantage of that defense early. And while they did not score in the second half, they didn't need to. But I feel like if they really needed some more points, they could have put it up. I believe the Chiefs actually left points on the table there. They just would rather play it safe, and you kind of saw that in a few throws. Noah Gray, the tight end, Mahomes kind of underthrew him on a pretty big, not big in the scheme of the game, but it felt like if Mahomes hits him maybe in stride, there could have been maybe really a dagger into the heart of that game. But he threw that one short a little bit, kind of felt like a safe throw. Kind of as a microcosm of that second half, I feel like that play in its particular is Mahomes throws it short, plays it conservative, because they knew that the defense was just giving the Ravens all sorts of trouble. And the Ravens also gave themselves a lot of trouble. I'm not too sure if it was the offensive coordinator, Lamar Jackson, Harbaugh, whoever. The Ravens really abandoned the run, even when it was 17-7, you're only down by 10. That you've been stopping the Chiefs a couple times. They really abandoned the run. Gus Edwards doesn't want to get anything. Justice Hill doesn't get anything. Lamar kind of only wound up running a few times after he couldn't throw the ball deep. He was hell bent to throw that ball deep, and he really just couldn't. He played right into the teeth of that defense. I know a lot of people have heard that all week, but it's really fascinating that there felt like there was no adjustment to the fact that they could have at least tried running the ball more. And now we sit after losing that game. Lamar really has only had the one spectacular postseason game, the previous round against the Texans. But now you kind of look at that. It was at the outlier with it, now it coming into more of a full circle. That feels more like the Texans. They got the big win. They kind of come out flat. The offense kind of just can't get anything going. So the monkey that was off of Lamar's back hops, in my opinion, right back on as a poor playoff quarterback. He's probably 90% sure 90 to 99% sure he's going to win another MVP. So he's going to be a two-time MVP, but he's going to have almost zero postseason success, and now he's been paid heavily. This really felt like the year to me that if the Ravens were going to try it, this would have had to been it. Burrow goes down. We can say what we want about Rodgers, but where the Jets was supposed to be viable, he gets hurt. All these quarterbacks go down. Everything goes right for the most part. They were healthy. They get an offensive coordinator that allegedly plays into Lamar's strength for passing and didn't want to run the ball as much, which I guess, true to form, you got to dance with what brung you. They kind of paid the piper on that one. When you kind of look at it, they brought in an offensive coordinator to throw the ball, and they threw the ball kind of to their own detriment, really, in that game. On the other side of that, the Chiefs really grind that out. I really never felt like the Chiefs were in danger of losing that game post getting to 17. Maybe when it was like 10-7, it was kind of a little back and forth, but never really getting into a danger mode. Obviously, they cap it off with a big third down pass to Marquez Valdes-Scantling to ice that game. Travis Kelce passes Jerry Rice for total postseason receptions. And congratulations to the Chiefs for navigating through the AFC, making back-to-back Super Bowls. Really, the Chiefs will have a lot on the line, legacy-wise, in my opinion. Lamar had a lot on this line, legacy-wise, too. I feel like his legacy is starting to be harder to change, because now we got another year of postseason, honestly, failure, and just a lot going on. I think if Lamar, he's got to make a Super Bowl at some point to really be discussed, because he's got all these regular season awards, he set all these records, but then as soon as he touches the postseason, it really just vanishes. It's a little bit peculiar that it'd be one thing if he's playing in these games and they're close, but he's playing good, but he just does not play good. He's almost like the bizarro world version of Eli Manning, who regular season was just kind of felt like a guy most of the time, but when he got to the playoffs, he really put that last name Manning to good use. He was sensational in playoff games, especially for those two Super Bowl runs, where Lamar is sensational in the regular season and really is middling in the playoffs. So we'll talk more about the Ravens situation going forward here in a couple of weeks when after the Super Bowl, like I've said on a previous podcast, we'll start breaking down division by division. We'll kind of touch on their situation more forward going there. But the Chiefs, like I said, advance to the AFC. They win the AFC Championship. They go to the Super Bowl. And now we move to the NFC side of things. The Detroit Lions and the 49ers. The 49ers survive a really poor performance in the first half and are very lucky to be in the Super Bowl, which sounds bizarre, but I watched all of that game. The 49ers are extremely lucky to be playing in Las Vegas right now. They beat the Lions 34-31. I came really close on that on the exact score. I believe I had that 33-30. Lions, once again, I got that backwards. So, really when looking at that game, Detroit has their way with San Francisco in the first half. They're just dominating. They're going up huge. And then they hit a fourth down decision. And this is going to be a discussion somewhat based on these decisions. The first one, in my opinion, is an acceptable, livable one. It's not a makeable field goal. Their kicker had is not exactly reliable. He's not a Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker. He may not have been that automatic from that range. So the first time you're up huge, you're up 2 scores. Field goal would have made it 3, but they go for it to try to kind of burn more clock, really get that dagger. They don't convert. Now the call, that particular play could have been made. It wasn't a bad play call, but it doesn't work. San Francisco immediately gets the ball, charges all the way down the field, gets a touchdown. The Lions, on the very next possession, the first offensive snap after that, a botched handoff. It looked like the running back was on the wrong side or something. Botched handoff, fumble, and then the Niners score again. And now it's momentum swung all the way back to San Francisco. And then we advanced later in the game to where I believe it was the 49ers were up 27-24, and Detroit had another fourth down opportunity where they to kick a field goal and tie it, or to go for it, try to take the lead with a touchdown. They weren't on the goal line, but that was the premise that they eventually chose for, which was going for it the second time on fourth down, and they failed to convert that one, which ultimately really doomed the Lions on that second fourth down. And me personally, the second fourth down is the complete incorrect decision, and there is aggression, going forward, keeping your foot on the gas, and then you have to, as a head coach, I put this 100% on Dan Campbell. When you look at it in totality on that second fourth down, you have to feel the game. You have to tie it there, because at the worst that can happen is San Francisco on the next possession goes down and gets a touchdown, but it's still a one-score game. You can then go down and get a touchdown unless they somehow bled all of the time off, versus really rolling the dice and coming up for really the fatal time, snake eyes. But I really put that one on Dan Campbell. I think that's a decision that's, even though publicly he says he stood by it, it was his, they played the season aggressive, it was in character the whole season. I think that's one that as a Lions fan you'd have to lose a lot of sleep over, and especially as a head coach, that's one that he probably really in hindsight needs to know you have to go for the field goal and go for that one. And I want to touch on one other thing, because obviously San Francisco goes down and gets up to, gets a touchdown off of that again, makes it really 34, 24. And the Lions made it down to the goal line again. They're really running out of time now. They have 3 timeouts. It's a minute left. It's third. So second and goal or third and goal. I cannot correctly remember the down. But they decide to run the ball instead of passing again, which boggled my mind, because they don't get it. That's another huge gamble that I think really also kind of cost them again. And who knows? Obviously, San Francisco in the second half was rolling, even with 3 timeouts. Who knows what happens? But I really, and it's come out. He said in a press conference that he said to run the ball. Dan Campbell himself, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, he was calling the plays. Dan Campbell overruled or suggested to run the ball. He thought, in his own words, he thought it was there to pop wide open, to walk right in. Doesn't happen, gets stopped in bounds, and that's like another. So really, in a big game like that, where they're really the underdog. They're really the underdogs. They're probably not supposed to win that game. They were rolling, but it felt like every major decision the head coach made to it backfired every single time. So I think that's something the Lions need to kind of maybe look at going forward. Obviously, they won't replace him going into this year, but Ben Johnson electing to come back instead of go take another job, he believes he's in a better position with the Lions than to go take a head coaching opportunity in maybe a more dysfunctional franchise like a Washington or Seattle's not really dysfunctional, but they also only have Geno Smith or Drew Lock as their quarterback. So that's going to be a huge plus for the Lions. But I got to think if they have another one of these meltdowns in the playoffs, they might have to kind of start looking a little bit sideways at Campbell because aggression is fine, but aggression got Brandon Staley ran out of the Chargers because aggression is fine if you win. Aggression in losing, you only get so much of a grace for that, in my opinion. But kind of based on how some things with some other teams played out. But on the flip side, the Niners, once again, they don't look good, but they can still win. Obviously, they did win. And it was a very bizarre playoff run up to this point. They've fallen behind in both of their playoff games. And kind of looking at that, it's weird. Purdy doesn't play well for the most part till the very end of the game. They get, like I said, when I talk about the luck part, there was a play where Purdy basically throws a ball and the Lions defender is running under it like he's the wide receiver. And the wide receiver is trying to play cornerback to break that up. And then obviously what will be an infamous play, especially if they go on to win the Super Bowl, is the ball that bounces off of a helmet and into Brandon, I believe it was Brandon Ayuk's arms, bounced off a Lions helmet and into his arms for a catch. A lot of those weird 1 in a million plays really keeps breaking the 49ers' way. And I do got to wonder what happens when that stops breaking their way, when some of these defenders come down with these picks and aren't just dropping them. I think Purdy is kind of, I think, hitting a ceiling right now. And he's just kind of benefiting from some luck in some instances of these plays. But, luck or not, they also advanced. So congratulations to the 49ers and Shanahan. Going to have a repeat of a Super Bowl matchup from a couple of years ago. The Chiefs are going to try to repeat history. 49ers are hoping they studied from their mistakes and they'll be able to overcome it. Like I said, next week we'll get more into the weeds on that matchup. But as far as where I see the two losers of the conference games going, Baltimore will probably be back in the playoffs so long as Lamar stays healthy. Burrow is just as much of an injury prone as Lamar Jackson. Pittsburgh is kind of just being Pittsburgh. I don't really know what they're doing right now, what their offense is. I feel like they have kind of a adventure going on at quarterback, to say the least, on who they may or may not want starting. They've hired Arthur Smith, who got fired from the Falcons, for their OC, so maybe that works. They're just kind of feels like they're just spinning the wheel for an offensive coordinator right now. I think long term, or else short term for the next season or two, the Ravens will be back. They have a nice core. Mark Andrews, obviously, he kind of came back. He'll be back to fully healthy. Zay Flowers, even with the very poor decision making in the title game, obviously the taunting penalty, trying to reach out when he doesn't have to, gets it knocked out by Snead, fumbles, recovered by the Chiefs, and then getting so mad After that, he punches. The report was, I believe, he punches the bench, taking out frustration, and he winds up cutting his hand open. And he did not see a whole lot of action after that. Whether or not that cut was bad enough he couldn't catch is one thing, or another. But still, a lot of frustration boiled over right there. Really kind of quick succession, one after another. So that's kind of something to kind of keep an eye on. See if that young wide receiver can kind of keep his head back cool. Obviously, you kind of feel bad for him. He's a rookie. You know, he shouldn't have done it, but then again, he's probably going to make those mistakes. He doesn't have the seasoning of been there, done that to realize he can't do what he did. As I go for the Lions, I'm going to get into it when I get into the North, but I feel like they're one of 3 NFL teams, in my opinion, that are a complete an actual wild card. Not that they'll make the wild card round next year, but they could be anywhere from the best team in their division to potentially the worst, maybe not the worst in the Lions case, third place. It really depends what the Vikings do at quarterback. Because when you think weapons, the Vikings are better. The Packers, they might kind of be right there. Head coach, Matt LaFleur, kind of right there. Kevin O'Connell, once again, depending on what happens at quarterback, they could kind of be right there. Quarterback, if Love continues to develop, Love would probably be a better version of Jared Goff. Jared Goff's getting older. He's not that mobile. Once again, like I just said a couple of times, depending on what the Vikings do at quarterback, who the Bears have a quarterback, that could be one thing. If they do wind up picking like a Caleb Williams or rookie quarterback and he sets the league on fire like Stroud did, that could bump Goff down a little bit too. So really got to wait till after the draft, kind of see where things shake out. We'll do some post-draft predictions. We'll finish the NFL draft, and our coverage of that, and then we will rank the teams. I'll give some way too early projections just because see where things change as we go from draft to preseason to OTAs and stuff like that. But like I said, I think the Ravens will be okay. The Lions, I think, are a little bit shaky. I think they benefited from Kirk Cousins going down, as well as riding the momentum from the previous year into this one. So I really would like to see how they respond now to that kind of crushing end of the season, opposed to an uplifting win against Green Bay when it didn't matter, But that is going to do it for the talk on the conference games I have on my phone here, because there were a lot of coaching hires, coaching decisions that were made, kind of too many to keep track. There's a nice, neat list on the NFL app or NFL.com for head coaching and GM trackers. So I'm going to kind of hit up the hirings, kind of give my quick thoughts on it. The Atlanta Falcons are going to hire head coach Raheem Morris of the Rams. An interesting choice. I know Bill Belichick was hot for that job, but they wind up not wanting to cede that much power to Belichick, so that internally in the building that doesn't work out, and they go and they get Raheem Morris. So we'll see how that works out. My initial reaction is kind of a disappointing, kind of a dud. I mean, it's good for him, good for the opportunity. I hope he does well. I hope the Falcons obviously do well. I hope all the new head coaches do well. I'm not wishing ill on any of them, but just my initial reaction, I don't know if that was really the best person to hire for this roster, is to shift to a defensive coach when you have Kyle Pitts, Drake London. You're going to need a quarterback in Atlanta. The rumor is they may trade for Justin Fields. So you got to hope they hit on the offensive. I'm not going to cover, as a side note, the offensive and defensive coordinator hires for each team, because I really don't know who half of them are off the top of my head. A lot of these guys probably going to be unproven too, except for one. I will make a note when we get to the Eagles. But up next, The Ravens, they lose their defensive coordinator to Seattle. They promote from within. The Bills, kind of same thing. They kind of promote from within. The Carolina Panthers, they take Dave Canellis from the Buccaneers to be their next head coach. They had a whole list of changes. I'm not gonna cross my fingers. I'm not gonna do anything with the Carolina Panthers. That owner has proven to be extremely impulsive, meddling, and the Carolina Panthers are very quickly becoming, in my opinion, the next big kind of clown show, like how Cleveland was before Mayfield was drafted. That I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers win only 1 or 2 games again next year. Nothing against Canellis, but if the owner is as meddling and that whole office is a joke right now, it's going to be hard for anybody to succeed in that place. Las Vegas Raiders. They finalized making Antonio Pierce the full-time head coach. I disagree with making him the full-time head coach. He had a couple of good wins, but as an interim, I kind of feel like in the long term, it's not gonna work out. I think the Raiders could have potentially gone maybe a little bit big game hunting again, but Pierce gets the job. We'll see what comes of that. They've hired, as a side note, Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. So we'll kind of see how that works. I don't have high hopes. He is, as of right now, we'll talk about it with the next team we talk about. He is comfortably the fourth place coach in that division. Not really his own fault right now, but as of right now, he is far and away the fourth place coach with the Raiders right now. Because the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh fresh off of a Michigan national championship. So the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh. That's been rumored for a while that's gonna happen, and what's going on there with that. Take another sip of the water here. We'll see what happens. They're not gonna, in my opinion, right now. Once again, when we get to the AFC West in the off season, I'll break down why I don't think the Chargers are going to be able to compete on a serious level for the next year or two. But I think so long as they're patient with Harbaugh, let him kind of build things up, let Herbert adjust to the system, they can be a major threat. But as far as next year and even maybe the year after that, I don't think they're going to be a threat. They might vie for a wild card depending if the bottom falls out of the AFC again, kind of like how it did this year. But it's a good hire. They may eventually turn the Chargers into home games, into actual home games, and not just a neutral side at best. Going down to the New England Patriots, obviously they parted ways with Bill Belichick. They hired Gerard Mayo from within, promote him up. Well, really, once again, baffling decision, in my opinion. This is one of the most baffling head coaching hires, in my opinion. I get it, he was in place and all this other stuff, unless they contractually almost had to give him the head coaching job based on something or another, I guess. I don't get it. You just got done having Bill Belichick, one of the better defensive minds to ever be involved in football. You almost, I feel, had to pivot to offense. Try to start a clean slate, hit the offensive side, try to start building for it, but instead it kind of feels like they went with a Bill Belichick Jr. ish, from that coaching tree, which has almost zero winning coaches produced out of it. It's not a very good tree. The two best cases out of the Bill Belichick coaching tree is Eric Mangini, but that's been a long time ago, and kind of Bill O'Brien, but also Bill O'Brien traded in his prime DeAndre Hopkins for a bottle of water, 2 bags of chip, and bus fare. So, and obviously Vrabel is not part of the Belichick coaching tree. He played for the Patriots, but he did not come into coaching through Bill Belichick. So Vrabel does not count when you look at the tree. And obviously Josh McDaniels has flamed out several times as a head coach. But we scroll down. I want to make a note about the Philadelphia Eagles. The Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator Vic Fangio basically wanted to go to Philadelphia. There was mutual interest already. The defensive coordinator position comes open, and so they hire Fangio. The Dolphins' defense to me was not very impressive this season. I know they kind of got injuries there towards the end, but I don't know. Maybe with what Philadelphia has on offense, Fangio might have a little bit more to work with. And then they also hire Kellen Moore, the ex-Charger, kind of came to not necessarily fame, but kind of mainstream attention as the Dallas Cowboy offensive coordinator that got let go of his duties for Mike McCarthy to take over this season. Philadelphia keeps Nick Sirianni. I'm not sure why. I felt like he lost that locker room. He's going to start out on a scolding hot seat. I would not be surprised if he gets fired mid-season and Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio is interim in that season. But I really don't see the Eagles doing much next season. I think there's going to be a continued decline with that team next season. Seattle Seahawks, as I mentioned, they hire Mike Macdonald. The Tennessee Titans hire Brian Callahan. I believe he was the Bengals offensive coordinator. Not too. I don't know too much about him. Uh, my initial gut reaction on that is it's interesting. Obviously, they part ways and slash fire Mike Vrabel. That kind of felt like a weird thing. I think Vrabel was done with them. The owner kind of wanted somebody, or the GM, that they would kind of mesh more with. Vrabel kind of wanted it done his way. I think Vrabel's an excellent coach. Vrabel and Belichick both don't get hired as of right now this cycle, but I think deep down both of them were probably okay with that for right now. There are potentially a lot of really good head coaching opportunities that'll probably open up next season. So stepping away for a year to come back, kind of like what Doug Peterson did, I think that could be something great in the future for those two guys as head coaches. But yeah, Brian Callahan, he was the Bengals OC, like I said. You have Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Joe Burrow, not exactly building things from the ground up. You kind of, I don't know. We'll have to see where that goes. The AFC South is always a little bit weird, so it could take off like a rocket. The Washington Commanders, interestingly enough, hired Dan Quinn. I know they were interested in Ben Johnson. Johnson allegedly set a price that he wanted, and the Commanders were unwilling to pay that. Johnson kind of saying he liked where he was at right now with the Lions, so it's going to take a boatload of money in regard for him to leave where he kind of wants to stay. Obviously, that price was too much, so they go and they hire Dan Quinn. They fire Ron Rivera for Dan Quinn. It feels like a lateral move. Dan Quinn will probably be a better head coach than Rivera. I feel like Rivera was kind of getting older. He had to fight with cancer. I think head coaching was kind of becoming a little bit much for him. And Dan Quinn kind of felt like he had done all he could do in Washington at this time. Or not Washington, my apologies. Dan Quinn all he could do in Dallas at this time. So, as that goes, hopefully everything works out for Dan. Maybe Washington with the new owner, they kind of get things rolling back on track for that franchise. Another coach that didn't get fired, I was surprised by, Sean McDermott, I gotta think he's kind of like Sirianni. He is he is on a scolding hot seat going into next year. Where I think if they falter like how they did last year, this year, I think instead of keeping him, he could be kaput. Uh, I I really think the Bills need to move off of Sean McDermott. I've been vocal about that. He, I think, has peaked. He's gotten him as far as he's going to get him. He got them to an AFC title game once, and they haven't even really sniffed it since then. So yeah, that's it. The Bills obviously kind of stay with what they have, and kind of like the old phrase always is: if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. They just keep rolling with Sean McDermott. Just kind of see what they want to do. Maybe they'll hang another Super Bowl banner in the practice facility, even though they haven't won one yet. But the division, in my opinion, is not going to get any easier. So if I had to look at it, I do think um, that Sean McDermott gets fired next season because I don't see them winning the Super Bowl or even making an AFC title game. They haven't shown that ability. Stephon Diggs could be out. A lot of turmoil might be coming up with the Bills. So, yeah, like I said, next week we are going to go deep dive into the Super Bowl. I'm going to give you MVP odds, some smart bets, in my opinion, for who could win the MVP. And we're going to kind of wrap up the show now. And we're going to see you guys next week. Like I said, we're going to talk Super Bowl, and then we're also going to preview some other stuff. And like I said, working on that Spotify deal. Like I said, as soon as we get that going, we'll make a special announcement. We'll get everything set up for you guys. So, like I said, we're expanding, we're going, we're trying to broaden our horizons. So, if you could, like, comment, subscribe, share it around, kind of help us spread the word. Obviously we're expanding. We're trying to do our best. This is not possible without you guys watching. I know there may not be a lot of you now, but hopefully in the future there will be. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.